we get started this evening, the Cumberland Town Council would like to share that Councilor Tom Groover has decided to step away from the Town Council for personal reasons. This will be effective immediately. Councilor Groover was first elected in 2011. His contributions to the town of Cumberland have been immeasurable since then. Along with the Town Council, Tom has served on the Planning Board, Lands and Conservation Commission, Shellfish Conservation Commission, Coastal Waters Commission, and is currently chair of the Finance Committee. Along with all of his committee work, Tom has been an incredible advocate for residents in Cumberland. He helped begin our Aging in Place program to assist older residents living in town and contribute to serve on that committee, as well as our senior property tax rebate program. Tom's impact and passion can be probably felt strongest within the community food pantry that he also spearheaded. From picking up milk to making deliveries and loading vehicles, Tom is a staple at the pantry and has helped hundreds of local families every single month since its honors. Tom's presence, sense of humor, experience, and controllable kindness will be missed dearly. We wish him all the best. Thank you, Tom, for your service. First item on the agenda this evening is to approval of minutes. Would anybody like to?
So move.
I have a motion. Looking for a second?
Second.
I have a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes as presented to us? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call for motion. All those in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the manager's report. Mr. Shane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a few items. We are in the process now of completing a labor contract with the fire and emergency medical services staff. We hope to have that to the Finance Committee for their review on June 6th and for your approval 2 weeks later. We also got information from the DOT, basically asking for more information about our Route 100 roundabout project, which is good news. We're spelling out some of the pieces of information they're looking to put together for a preliminary design report, which I believe will be forthcoming in the next month or so. So very exciting news there. At the same time, Helene and I both attended a training session last week. It was brutal on Zoom, of course, with the DOT for being certified as local project administrators. So we're both certified now, along with Christopher Bolduc. We are having our second meeting this Friday with EcoMaine to discuss a regional trash and recycling collection program, which will be basically a collaboration of about 5 or 6 different towns looking together to put together one project and one account for the collection of trash and recycling. It'll change the way we do that pretty dramatically. As we've discussed for the last few years, the days of employees basically throwing stuff in the back at 50 pounds a bag and doing that all day and 500 stops a day here in Cumberland for 5 days a week are pretty much coming to an end. That'll be replaced by an automated service that basically has a large arm on the side of the truck that picks a container up and dumps it in top of the vehicle. Those containers are very specific, will be supplied somehow. We haven't figured that piece out, but lots of moving parts to this, obviously because of our pay-as-you-throw program, which generates nearly $350,000 a year in revenues to offset our tax collection, our trash collection. We're trying to figure out, you know, how do we do that and do this at the same time. So still a lot more to come. Every town has a little bit of a different program, but putting this all together should save us all some money and encourage other trash vendors to bid on this that may not be in our region currently. We also are looking to most likely do some paving in Wildwood in the next 2 months. We looked at the areas that are that will require some work. Public Works will be in there getting them prepared for paving. A lot of areas that didn't fare well this winter will be excavated, re-gravelled, and replaced. Our staff will be doing most of that work. And we'll also be holding drainage meetings for new drainage that will be on Old Musket and Long Meadows Road, probably in about 2 weeks toward the end of this month, to just walk the neighbors on site through the project. Mostly catch basin drainages and some additional paving to the current level will allow that to settle for the winter, and then it'll be repaved entirely next year once it's gone through a frost cycle. And we're also have successfully combined our two projects that we got through PACS. One was a $200,000 project, and one is a $400,000 project for reconstruction of the sidewalks along Main Street through the school zones, all the way to the North Yarmouth line, providing the safety improvements necessary for the safety ramps and the ADA ramps that you see in most places. A lot of our ramps are not quite to grade and are a little too steep, and they don't have all the truncated domes. We have about, I think, 38 sets of sidewalks that are missing those truncated domes right now, so that'll be a lot safer for people that basically have some impairments that will improve the ability for them to walk on our sidewalks and be compliant with state and federal requirements. That'll be pretty exciting that we were able to combine those two projects. We're also looking for enhancements down to hopefully as far as the Apple Barrel and down to the middle school entrance. So we're going to make sure that most of that area is in compliance. We're also looking for some PED-activated lights that are solar-powered that basically when pedestrians are present, they can basically push those buttons near the crosswalks and be safe. After the accident we had last fall up on Farwell in one of the crosswalks where a young child was hit, we basically were already in the process of getting this project rolling, but the state got involved as well to help us, and we're working together with them collaboratively. They'll be paying for over 50% of this project, so we're pretty excited about that as well. So I'll keep you posted on that, and we hope to have something to report back on the sidewalk project as well as the Route 100 project probably sometime after Labor Day. That's all I have.
Thank you. Next item on our agenda this evening is public discussion. Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion. Is there anyone here this evening who would like to address the council? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Terry Maloney Kelly from Maloney's Ridgeway. This afternoon, I said to my husband, John, I got to take a few minutes to reflect because I want to make some comments tonight. And he said, you're not speaking, are you? I'm like, are you kidding? I'm not going to give up an opportunity to speak. So thank you very much for allowing us the time as residents to come forward. Did you know that May is National Health Awareness Month? In 1949, more than 70 years ago, the United States declared May as the Mental Health Awareness Month as a way to raise awareness of those living with mental or behavioral health challenges. Mental illness is a disease that can present itself in many forms, including anxiety, obsessive obstructive disorder, PTSD, dementia, eating disorders, depression, bipolar disorders. The list is long. 1 in 20 adults in the United States suffer from mental illness, but many are not diagnosed or under treatment. In an effort to bring awareness to this prevalence, our community in 2021 started a Smash the Stigma initiative in which our Councilor Foster was very active, and I thank you. Also, every week in our email, The Crier, there is under the community news resources for folks to tap and different mental health topics that are covered. This is a really tough and sensitive subject to talk about publicly. One of the efforts about getting the conversation going was having signs that I have in front here called Smash the Stigma. During the winter, I have noticed that most of the signs have disappeared throughout our community. So I would like to invite my fellow community members who have one of these signs to put it back out for the month of May, at least, in recognition of Mental Health Awareness Week, in the hope that it might spark a conversation with someone who may be in need. You never know who that may be. So to this end, I would really like to applaud our town in joining Falmouth and Yarmouth to share a mental health responder through our police departments. This will be used to respond to those calls involving mental health-related issues. I have no idea what that percentage is, but I suspect, given all of the types of diseases within that realm, it's pretty high. This is a great first step, finally, and thank you, to help our qualified public safety personnel at incidences involving a mental illness issue. So I've been quizzing our town manager about all of the details of this program. I honestly thought it was going to hit the road a couple weeks ago. But I know it's a July 1 start date, and I can't wait to hear more about this program and how it's going to be integrated into our community. The last item, I just would love to take a moment publicly to thank Sergeant Thomas Burgess for his retirement from the Cumberland Police Force after 33 years. Sergeant Burgess, or Tommy, as I have always known him, grew up in my neighborhood. Although I was older and was never around to get in trouble with him, unlike some of my siblings, I remember his parents and family very dearly. Although we may not have agreed at times about the department's approach over the years, I have always respected and appreciated his dedication to our community. How blessed are we to benefit from his retirement. As a member of our Public Works team, we can look forward to him greeting us with his big smile when we go to the brush dump, or when perhaps he is helping our folks at senior housing. He's an oldie, but a goodie. So congratulations, Tommy Burgess, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for your service to our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else? Legislation and policy, 22-056. To hear a report from town attorney regarding a consent order with Randall Kopp for property located at map R007, lot 57C, Pointer Way, and to set a public hearing date of June 6, 2022 for action. I believe I'll let the town attorney introduce this to us.
Mr. Chairman,
Before I give you the, Mr. Kopp,
I'm going to recuse myself, so.
there's been a request by Councilor Kopp to recuse himself. Looking for an indication that it meets our approval. Signify. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors. As the chair indicated, the item on the agenda this evening is simply, or action item on the agenda this evening is simply for you to set a public hearing, but I also wanted to provide a brief history of the matter before you and answer any questions to the extent you have them. But I want to reiterate that although you may take public comment on this agenda item this evening, there will be a public hearing, a separate public hearing at a future date, and no action is expected to be taken this evening on this item other than setting the public hearing. So the proposed consent order that is before you this evening stems from a notice of violation on a property in Cumberland that dates back to 2018. The notice of violation was appealed to the town's Board of Appeals. The Board of Appeals upheld the notice of violation. That was then appealed to Superior Court under what we call a Rule 80B motion. And the Superior Court also upheld the town's decision regarding the notice of violation and the Board of Appeals decision. All of those were based on what I'll categorize generally as earth extraction and earth moving activities on the property that were in violation of the town's ordinances. The town, through the process of the Superior Court action, filed a counterclaim in defending the complaint and sought damages, namely remediation of the property to resolve the earth moving and the earth extraction, attorney's fees for defending the complaint, and a civil penalty to the extent that the court would award it. The Superior Court judgment didn't occur until 2019, and the last step in that process was for the court to hold a hearing on the town's requested damages and remedies. That didn't occur as a result of COVID and has still been on the court's docket. So the parties have been in discussions since that time to arrive at a negotiated agreement for the proposed consent order as it relates to those remedies. And that's what's before you this evening and what will ultimately be before you for further action following a public hearing. The terms of the proposed consent order have been negotiated with the property owner, and I'll summarize them very briefly. The first of which is a remediation and revegetation plan that has to be fully engineered and also has to be approved by and inspected by a third-party inspector. And that's going to be the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District. There's a particular individual who's been identified there and agreed upon by both parties to be responsible for reviewing the revegetation and remediation plan to ensure that it, in fact, resolves the issues at the property in terms of the extraction and earth-moving materials. There is a date by which that work must be completed. That's October 15th, 2023. The parties have proposed that the court would retain jurisdiction over the issue until July 1 of 2024 to ensure that any further enforcement that needed to occur could occur. The town's code enforcement officer will retain the right to inspect the property for all other local state and local ordinance and code compliance as it relates to any building activity or any other activities on the property. The property will also require a certificate of occupancy under the town's ordinances. That is not addressed in the consent order, meaning that that is still a requirement that has not been waived in any way and is not otherwise been granted at this point. So all of the standard processes with respect to that will still apply. And then in terms of costs, the property owner will bear the cost of all of the inspection of the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District staff. There will be $20,000 of attorney's fees awarded to the town for defending the complaint. And there is a $19,000 penalty that is agreed to in this order, but provided that all of the work is satisfactorily completed, that would be permanently suspending, meaning that would not actually be paid if everything, the remediation and revegetation goes according to the engineered plan. And then lastly, the property owner will be required to provide performance and payment bond for 100% of the work required to complete the remediation and revegetation plan upon approval of Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation. And then I guess, actually lastly, one other item in here is with respect to the removal of materials on the property, which has been a concern as well. The consent order limits that to particular times, so it's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday. So to the extent that is needed as part of the remediation and revegetation, that's limited to or confined to those hours, so that the property owner has to comply with that as well. Those are the highlights of that. I'm happy to answer any questions, but again, this is just before you this evening to set a public hearing. Thank you.
Lisa, thanks for coming in tonight. This decree is from an incident that occurred in 2018, correct? Nothing before that?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
A quick question, I'll jump in between you. The date of 2023, I understand, is because of vegetation to have an opportunity to take effect, so that I would assume, I hope, correct me if I'm wrong, that constructive work will begin immediately, and there will be substantially completed this year and not waiting to the last minute of 2023.
That's the expectation, and that's our hope for getting this in place and agreed to as soon as possible so that work can actually commence, and that the plan, that there is an adequate amount of time under the revegetation plan for the work to actually be inspected and approved and to have been conducted in a way that, in fact, is, growing and provides some satisfactory revegetation by that date. If there is any concern about that, then that's something that we would address in terms of the ability to get this agreed to by the parties, or finally agreed to and signed by the parties, and then getting the work in place. But that date is built upon, that enforcement date is built around that idea that work would start, so that things could actually be, inspected and approved at that point.
So, I'm not sure that it spells it out, but, and shame on me for making assumptions, but where I am assuming that construction will begin, right after the agreements are signed, dotted, and recorded.
So it doesn't specify a date for construction to commence in the agreement, and that's certainly something that we can bring back if there's a concern with respect to that occurring. But that, currently, the only date that's in here is with respect to the
Completion
completion
date.
of the work.
Right.
And there is it appears to be a date, unless there's been an updated draft under Section 2, talking about that the plan has to be submitted within 120 days of the date of this consent order, right?
That's right.
But that's just the plan outlining
just
what
the
the
plan.
potential work would be.
There's a very good possibility this may not start till next spring,
That's what I'm wondering, too.
because the judge still has to sign it. They have to submit a plan to the Soil Conservation Service. There's a lot of work that has to happen ahead of time. Bonds and performance and payment bonds have to be put in place and approved. So there is some work that has to be done prior to this. So your thought about it starting next month is probably not realistic. It may start in, late August, early September, to get into the last section of the growing season for this year.
So even conservatively, if it started next summer, 2023, the court would still maintain jurisdiction over this matter until 2024, a following year after that, right?
Correct.
Okay.
July 1 of 2024 is the court's, currently as drafted.
And that's why that's why it's 2 years away and not next year.
So those that are in the audience and who may be watching this at home, the agenda this evening is to set a public hearing for a later date so that those people who have an interest in this may speak and provide input for us this evening. June the 6th, I think it is, but anyways, is there any further discussion amongst the councilors? I think I'm comfortable with the answers I got, responding to time and dates as completion and start, and I understand that the constraints are outside of this board to, other people have to sign off on this also. So, if there is no further discussion, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I move to set a public hearing date of June 6th to consider and act on a consent order with Randall Kopp for property located at map R007, lot 57C, Pointer Way.
Second.
And a second. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I believe you may have folks from the public that might want to give you comment tonight.
We will reserve our vote. Is there anybody from the audience who would like to speak on this matter? See none. I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Item 22-057, to hold a public hearing to consider and act on a contract zone agreement for the Grange at Longwoods as recommended by the planning board. This is a project that has been before us at least twice. It's been to the planning board. It has been up and down Main Street and Longwoods Road. And it is here this evening for us to approve a contract zone. Does the applicant wish to make a statement before we get started on this?
Do you want to show that?
If you feel it's appropriate.
Are you doing the presentation?
Quick introduction. Good evening, counselors. Alex Timpson here. I'm the point person for this project. And I just want to say that we did close on the conservation easement, which triggered this meeting here tonight. And so, you know, the whole property is 65 acres. 54 of it will be permanently preserved. And if you take a minute to skim through the almost 40 pages of conservation easement language, you'll realize this is we're doing more than just putting this land into conservation. There's a lot of rules and what you can and can't do to protect this land from an environmental quality standpoint, but also to preserve it as a working farm. But the plan is pretty much conceptually is what I described when I came here, I think like last July. 54 acres permanently preserved, 7.5 acre development parcel that will house this farm-to-table Grange Hall pub. And so the point is that if a visitor would come to this property, he or she could take a walk on 3 miles of walking trails. We plan to put sculpture throughout the 3 miles of trails and some sculpture in some of the farm fields. We have protected the view shed, but we also hope to have a working farmer, work this land and potentially occupy the farmhouse and the barn. In addition to that, a visitor might grab a beer, might hear some acoustic music. So in other words, 4 or 5 or 6 things that a visitor to this place could do, all on one property. So it's more than just a conservation project. Hopefully it'll be a real community benefit for the town. And I'll leave the technical questions to Brenda.
The planning board met in February, made a recommendation to approve this, subject to the town council adopting the contract zone agreement. There is a lot of material in the contract zone. It basically is a, at the end of the day, it's a contract between many entities, not only the town, but to Sheboygan Island Mainland Trust, the Maine Farmland Trust, and there, anyways, we have gone through this thing, all of us this evening, the reiterations here. I think there are a few questions that we have for the applicant. Some of them are technical, some of them more of a question as to what your intentions are. But I think at least, I think the majority of us, or all of us, are comfortable with the contract in front of us. So, some questions from the council for the applicant. Ms.
Yeah.
Foster.
I was just gonna say, I think while the planning board did approve the recommendation, or approve it as presented, they did make some advisory recommendations to us on a couple of topics that I think are probably worthy of some discussion. One was around, there's a section around the second residential dwelling, and if we should, their recommendation was limiting the number of rooming units, so in that second residential structure. So I guess if you could help us understand what the intent of that residential structure would be, and maybe kind of based on the size of the farming land, like what the intent, like what would be the expected size of that? Because right now it just says 2 or more, so it's just,
Right. At this time, you know, everything is speculative because we haven't yet identified the farmer who might be operating this. But what we're trying to do is create room for there to be farm worker housing. And, you know, when they asked at the planning board meeting, we hadn't thought about an upper limit on that. The idea of sort of a common area and then separate bedrooms, which would be customary and that kind of a thing. That could be what that newer residential is probably the most likely thing. We went back and said, you know, 6 rooms, just to have a limit. Because they said, you know, could there be 20 rooms? And it's like, nobody would want 20 rooms. 6 bedrooms, and then the common room and the common kitchen kind of thing. Was what,
if
you know,
I'm looking at that map, remind me again where that second residential would just be like behind the,
Yes.
existing?
Over, yeah. Back in, wait a minute, I'm sorry. Future Trailhead. It's over in this area. Because this is a hard one for me to read.
It's right here.
Okay,
Yeah,
over here,
Right here, yeah.
right here is where it would go.
okay.
And so you feel like 6, I guess, residential housing units?
It's kind of open-ended, so if there was a farmer.
Gotta get
You might need to speak in the mic so folks can hear you.
We don't know if the farmer would choose to live in the existing farmhouse and then set up lodging for farm workers, or the farmer might choose to build a house for himself or herself. And so, depending on how that all plays out, it's going to be a different kind of structure. So what I think we talked about at the planning board is, and I came back with, I expressed to Brenda, and I think this got through to Carla Nixon, the town planner, that if we could cap the square footage of this future potential house at 7,000 square feet, finished indoors, with a limit of 6 bedrooms. And that's probably bigger than the house that I would build, but, you know, if some well-to-do farmer wants to build a nice, pretty big house, I think that's allowed in the RR1 zone, so why wouldn't it be allowed in this zone? We certainly, I don't think, have a density problem, given there's 65 acres on this property.
So,
Because it's so speculative, the idea of just creating an upper limit, it's like, you know, you want to do something that's in the realm of reasonable.
Right.
But that does give you some assurance that, yes, it's not going to be a, you know, overbuilt thing. So they had said, you know, what would be the max number of bedrooms? And again, it could be that the farm help will be in the existing farmhouse. And this will be a house where the farmer, who may have a bunch of kids, will want to live. So we just don't know. We're trying to not box ourselves in and have to come back for an amendment on that point.
So to ask the question maybe a different way, given the size of arable land here, how many workers would traditionally be working a field or fields of that size? Do we know?
We don't, and it could change with the season, you know, depending on what they are growing. You know, one of the things that, you know, under the conservation easement, which is a perpetual thing that we always talk about, is that things change. You can't necessarily, it's not like a business plan, you know? It's something that's going to be there 50 years from now. So we're trying to think about it in that term of saying, you know, I don't know what they're going to be growing. I don't know what the intensity will be, how much more mechanized it might be. You might need fewer. At the same time, the kind of crops that will be most remunerative might require a lot of hands-on stuff. So we're trying to find that middle ground when we're not really sure exactly what we're doing in terms of the future, because we can't predict that. What we can say is it's a 65-acre parcel of land. There's a limited amount of it that can be developed, and that's a, you know, 6 or 7 acre parcel. And on that, there's a, you know, going to be another residential structure, and we're willing to put whatever reasonable limits are appropriate on that.
so the reasonable limit is 7,000 square feet.
That's the number he just has put out, yes, that six bedrooms, 7,000 square foot max.
All right. do you own the piece of land that goes underneath the power lines, or is that an easement?
There's going to be an easement with CMP under that. CMP owns that land. There'll have to be an easement granted by CMP. There is an easement that's there now.
Right,
We just
right,
have to
yeah.
confirm some things with them.
So that easement's for ingress and egress as well as agricultural purposes, is that?
Yes, yes. So it doesn't stop people from doing that. Most of this is not on that easement. It just crosses that easement. The road crosses that easement, a little corner of it, basically.
There's no limitation to the agricultural use of the
There is not.
land beneath the easement?
Right. To my knowledge, that is right. That is the language of that easement.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and I didn't see the planning board meeting, but there was some discussion about growing marijuana, and I never heard the outcome of,
I think the answer to that was, it depends on what else is allowed in the town. I don't know if that's allowed anywhere in the town. If it's allowed in any other zone and would be allowed, say, in the RR1 zone, then I don't know why it wouldn't be allowed here. Nobody's asking for anything more than what would be allowed in other zones that are appropriate to grow any kind of crop. But I don't think that they want to say they can't grow it either. They're just saying, however the town chooses to regulate the growth, cultivation of cannabis kind of crops should apply here just as they would anywhere else. No more, no less.
the only reason that I ask is because we have some problems with odors, and that's why I'm asking, I guess.
Well, and I
mean,
would think that would be true anywhere in the town. I know that some other municipalities are, that's a very important thing for them in terms of buffers and stuff, because it does definitely give off a scent. But again, if you choose to regulate that in any part of town, this would be subject, I think, could be made subject to the same rules on that particular crop.
So,
Okay.
The specific recollection I have is that we left that planning board meeting saying, we kind of had a verbal agreement saying that we would adhere to the current and to the future RR1 zone restrictions or rules regarding marijuana, which seemed pretty reasonable because
Okay.
the property was zoned RR1 before I came along.
thank you.
Mr. Timpson, while we've got you here close to the mic, I was going to ask, several weeks ago, I was driving by and I saw some equipment up there. Can you talk a little bit about what was going on?
Yeah, so I misinterpreted Bill Longley's conversation I had with him about roughing in the road. And we had, I did have a forest management plan done, and Carla Nixon came out to inspect the site before the logging that was specified in that forest management done. And so that was all done above board. And then when the logging was done, there was some ruts in the back part where the parking lot's going to be. So Ben Grover, who's my contractor, said, I've got a window of time. We could rough the road in, and I could clean up that area, and so we wouldn't have to worry about a potential erosion back there. But apparently, I got a phone call from Bill Shane saying that's a no-no. And I was not aware of that until Bill called me. So I just misinterpreted Bill Longley's conversation that I had with him.
Okay. I think it was just a discussion that we had on the council, and I want to make sure, I think you guys have been wonderfully open and honest and transparent with us about what I think is a wonderful business idea here in Cumberland, and obviously, we just want to keep it that way, so.
No, I appreciate that, and I take total ownership of that misstep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Just following up with what Mark just brought up is, I'm all in favor of this project. I have been since you came in with the concept, but I really feel that you betrayed our trust in building that road. It wasn't filling in potholes. I know we want to try to make it sound like it was minor and so on. You basically were rebuilding the road. And I mean, to the point that we, as a council, got an email and what the heck's going on, and it really was not a good way to start this project out with the council, and not a good trust builder with the council, and just being upfront with you, and like, I'm not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater, don't get me wrong, but, it was a absolutely poor way to start out, so. That's all I have.
So, I'm going to hold the further questions for a few moments here. This is a public hearing, so I'd like to hear from the members of the public who are here this evening. If there's anybody here who would like to address the council or the applicant, please step up to the mic and tell us who you are and ask away. Yes, ma'am.
Terry Maloney Kelly, Maloney's Ridgeway. I have not paid attention to this project, but just from discussion tonight, I'm totally unclear about the marijuana issue. So I think that really needs to be clear, because it looks like mud right now to me. My understanding is we only have, excuse me, very specific places in this town in which a commercial operation can operate. So is this in that zone or not, is my question.
It is not.
So that would then say growing marijuana is
Is not-
really
is
not
not
an
allowed.
option for this location.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Council. Rod Vogel, Cumberland resident, Board Chair of the Shabig and Cumberland Land Trust, also known as CCLT. Good to see you all. I'm here with Penny Ashman, past Board Chair, long-term board member, and Chris Franklin from Maine Farmland Trust. So technical questions can go to them. But I just wanted to step up and say thank you for your support of this. Well, thank you in advance of your support of this. This is a priority for CCLT, and it has been since we've been working with Alex for several months now. We've been working tirelessly with Chris at Maine Farmland Trust and Chris Cabot at CCLT to work on the conservation easement that was referenced earlier. It's in Cumberland, one of our two acquisition priorities, as I think you know. We have a property that we're purchasing an easement on Blanchard Road, the Reed Family Farm, and this property. So we are very, very excited about this project. We are raising a lot of money for this, and we still have money to raise, even though the easement was closed last week. The easement will be conveyed to CCLT later in the month, so we feel like we have at least another month to raise the money we need to pay over to Maine Farmland Trust. So just on behalf of the board, I wanted to stand up here and share our excitement about this project. We know that a lot of others are excited about this project, and hopefully you'll vote in favor of it. Thank you.
I got a question for you. So for the viewing public out there, the 54 acres, who will be the owner of that?
Alex.
Synergosity LLC is the
Synergosity
answer.
LLC.
Okay, and so in the connection between your group and everybody is what?
So Maine Farmland Trust just closed with Synergosity LLC on the conservation easement. Maine Farmland Trust, I don't have the date, Chris, but I think later in the month, will be conveying that conservation easement to CCLT for us to hold in perpetuity. So we will be taking the legal rights to monitor the terms of that conservation easement that Brenda referred to earlier.
And is this property, any money for Lands for Maine's Future involved with the purchase or the?
No, it is not.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
The conservation easement, which is really quite well-written, even if you're a layperson, you can read through it. It talks about what can and cannot happen on the farm property, and it's intended to be held in perpetuity. So no matter who owns the land itself, those conservation restrictions will stay there forever. This will be farmland forever, and that is so valuable in a community with a heritage like Cumberland. So we're very, very proud of that part of this project.
Anybody else from the public? I'll leave the opportunity to speak open, so if anybody wants to speak as we continue our deliberations, please raise your hand. Alex, there's a request here to, for the first year, to have a food truck on board and use that to, for your means of conducting business. And have you drawn up plans yet for a shape of a building, size of a building, of what might replace that?
Yes, we have. So and I actually have a floor plan in my car. So this wants to look like a barn. And the dimensions of the building will be 42 by 72, 1 story. It won't be very high. It'll be less than 30 feet high, 35 feet high. It will be kind of an open floor plan with an open kitchen, and it'll open out onto a terrace. So pretty simple, and just if you can visualize a barn, you can visualize this Grange Hall pub. But if you want to see a picture of it, I have it in my car.
Do you plan on starting construction with that this year?
Yeah, we're planning, we're having construction drawings drawn up right now, and we're planning to get a foundation in September. Try to get ahead of the cold weather a little bit.
Anybody else have a question?
I think one of the other items that were brought up is under section D, and then, where is it? D4, around the time for amplified music. I think there was an ask to limit it from 10 to 10 p.m. for outdoor, but to extend it to go to 11 p.m. for indoor music. So I think that's another item for us to, that would amend what's in front of us.
So as a condition of approval, we would change the hours of outside. We would stipulate that it was from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m., and then we would, as for indoors, it would be 10 a.m. to 11 p.m.
Right.
indoors.
The 11 o'clock addition is the only real change.
Right.
And just to be clear here, these aren't separate amendments. These would be moving forward with what the planning board had recommended, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to add clarity to the up to 7,000 square feet and
Yes.
6 bedrooms as well as part of your amendment?
Yes.
Yes.
Is there anything? I think that was it that they put in their recommendation. I had no other questions.
Any other questions from the, so my wife has told me that I talk too much and I pontificate a lot too, but I'm going to risk her disapproval. If I think about conservation and land conservation and agriculture, I can't think of more worthy goals to pursue as a community. And I look at the, particularly with climate change and, the issue of trucking produce across the country. Anyways, I'm looking forward to seeing a working farm. I'm looking forward to, going over and getting a beer and a hot dog or a hamburger or something like that. But I think that this is a worthy project. Okay. If there are no more comments, questions, the order of business is to approve this contract zone. Would somebody be interested in making a motion? Mr. Cobb.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the contract zone agreement for the Grange at Longwoods as recommended by the planning board.
And
And with
And
volunteer
Two amendments.
with the following amendments. Limitation of structure of 7,000 square feet and the hours of
To
operation.
limit it.
The second housing unit would be limited to 7,000 square.
And two, that the second housing unit would be limited to 7,000 square feet
And
and
six-
no
Six
more than,
bedroom, no more than 6 bedroom units?
no more than 6 bedroom and no more than 35 feet tall. Is that true with the zoning?
No, that was
We're-
the other building.
No, we're taller than that now.
Okay.
We're
Oh, they are,
at
okay.
40.
All right.
And there's one additional amendment, I think, to make sure that indoor music could be held till 11 PM. So that's a change from 10 PM to 11 PM.
And that indoor music will be limited until 11 PM. Got all that, Brenda?
I will happily second that.
Thank you, Mark. I should have let you make the motion.
All right, so we have a motion that's been amended and seconded. Is there any further discussion among the council? Seeing none, I'll call for vote. All in favor? Contract zone is approved. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations.
Next item on the agenda is 22-058. To hear a report from the Lands and Conservation Commission regarding Phase 2 of the Climate Action Plan and accept the plan. And Mr. Gallaudet, I think, is teeing this up? Okay.
Can I take this one out?
Yes. Yep.
What do you got in there?
Don't you worry about it.
Only clear containers are allowed up here.
Well, sorry for the prop malfunction there, but I'm Denny Gallaudet, 67 Range Road. Pleasure to be with you folks again tonight. I'm Chair of the Sustainability Committee of the Lands and Conservation Commission, which is the successor to the Climate Action Plan Committee, which took the last 2 years putting together the Climate Action Plan that you're seeing Phase 2 of tonight. And I'll take a quick run through the document that you've already received. And I'll have some of my team members are here. Did you want to start, Bob? Hold on a second. Did you want to go before me? So Mike informs me that he'd just like to do a few remarks before we get going, so go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Town Council, I'm Mike Schwent, the Chair of your Lands and Conservation Commission. Tonight, you will get a look at some ways we, as individuals, can do things differently and have a direct positive impact on our environment. Some of the proposed changes may be hard to accomplish, others not so bad. A big thing between us and success may well be as simple as a changed mindset. With some thought, an open mind, and a willingness to do things differently, much can be accomplished. A big part of the environment in which Commission works stems from the vision and forethought of a couple of people. Liaison counselors who worked with and guided the Commission. I'm referring to Councilors Tom Gruber and Peter Bingham. In 2017, they suggested that the ordinance needed extensive rework to consolidate the management of town-owned lands and specified that the duties of the Commission and its subcommittees be clarified. We took a couple of runs at that ordinance, and I believe what we have now is good and is working. I thank them for their foresight and guidance as we worked our way through the drafting so that when your ordinance committee had a chance to look at it, they had something worthy of their consideration. Councilor Gruber and Councilor Bingham, thank you for your foresight and insight, your leadership in getting us off on the right trail. Today, your Lands and Conservation Commission and its subcommittees have 28 people volunteering their time and talent, a number serving more than one committee, striving to make our community better. Tonight's report, the second of our climate action plans, is the result of a year of hard work by the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. We are fortunate to have such a talent pool within our town, knowledgeable people who are willing to expend considerable time and energy to help plot a course for our future. The work will be carried forward by the Sustainability Subcommittee, chaired by Danny Gallaudet, and he will manage tonight's report presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schwinn.
Okay, so what we're going to be discussing tonight is Phase 2. And Phase 2, just by way of background, in 2019, the Town Council approved the formation of this subcommittee of the Climate Action Plan under 2 years to complete a 2-year study to consider aspects related to climate change, and particularly to do an inventory of the greenhouse gas emissions and make suggestions and goals. We presented Phase 1 last year, which you approved, and Phase 2 is what we're talking about tonight. This is the baseline for what we saw in 2015 of the carbon emissions of the community as a whole. They add up to 66,000 tons a year. And by sector, this is the school district, this is the town, and as we pointed out at that time, the major contributor of greenhouse gas emissions in a residential town like ours are the individual households and also the businesses. Phase 1 was the first 2, and we've gotten off to a terrific jump start on all of that with the solar field here and the police department moving forward with hybrid vehicles and so on and so forth. Really a great, I'm very proud to go to the GPCOG meetings because, you know, Cumberland is always like ahead of the pack. And so thanks for your support and for Bill's staff as well. Now, before we get going on the households, we don't have much to say about the business community. We took a careful look at them. This is a to-do, I think. We found that there are 109 businesses, according to the Department of Labor, employing about 1,200 people. We know how much electricity they generate. We know something about the square footage that they have, but we weren't able to get any more granular data. We attempted a survey, but didn't get a very good response. So down the line, I think we might try to understand what's going on there. It's not a large sector, but an important one. So we've come up with 10 actions that we want the residential, our neighbors, to consider over the next several decades until 2050 to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. We find really good news here that with the actions that we're taking, our households, the whole household sector can in fact become more than carbon neutral. They can become carbon positive. That is to say, they'll be sequestering more carbon than they're emitting, which is a pretty terrific thing. And we'll show you how that happens. I'm not going to discuss right now the first 3 because I'll have members of my team who focus on them specifically discuss them in the subsequent slides. And I'll just touch on a few of the remainder. By the way, these are ranked by impact. So over here we have the amount of CO2 removal that's coming from this action and so on and so forth. With the CCLT being here and Penny, you know, I think we're adding a goal strongly considering a 30 by 30 goal of conserving 30% of Cumberland's lands by 2030. Our analysis, which does include tree growth, which is a form of conservation, it's not as rigorous as a conservation easement, but if you include tree growth, we have about 21% of our lands already in some form of conservation. And that would be about 3,000 acres. 1,000 of which is owned by the town outright, and so on and so forth. So the goal is to add another 1,000 over the next 10 years. And boy, we've gotten a great start already.
Yeah.
I mean, you just discussed here the contract zoning over the Grange, which is about 50 acres. And there's several others in the queue that the CCLT has. And also the power of the conservation, the conservation subdivision ordinance itself is adding, every time there's development, 50% of that land is going into conservation. So Blanchard Oaks, that's 25 acres, and so on and so forth. And so the power of that, it gives us a lot of confidence that by 2030 or maybe before, we'll have this 4,000 acres under conservation, which would make us, it will really be a wonderful thing. And so we're excited about that. Solar panels, food waste is a big one that we're interested in focusing on, and kind of blending it with the composting system we already have to bring food waste into that stream, in addition to brush and so on and so forth. And so these are the other impacts, which I'm not going to discuss in detail right now, but we can take questions. And here are the actions for you folks, the actions for the TC that we're asking for. The first is the approval of the concept. Does this make sense for us to reach out to our friends and neighbors in the residential sector to attempt this and to support it? There's not much in the way of fiscal note associated with these actions, because these are things that the households themselves are doing. We have a couple in the budget, some monies to advance the food waste integration of the compost system. We have a small incentive program that we really haven't fully designed yet on how to encourage people to do sustainable landscaping. So not much fiscal impact here that you haven't already seen in this year's budget. And down the line, we're hoping for future staff support that the LCLC is also asking for themselves, and you've heard about that in the budget presentation. So those are the actions for the town council: the approval of concept, the fiscal note, which you've already approved through your budget process, and you've already considered the possibility of a future staff addition. Another way to look at this graphically is to show how these actions phase in. So right here is the current, or is the 2015 baseline, which is 55,000 tons from the retail sector, from the household sector. With the heat pump action that you'll hear about in a minute, we'll cut that in half. With the high-efficiency automobiles, we'll knock it down another, you'll hear more about this. And with the sustainable landscaping, is another big chunk. You'll say, well, wow, that's just landscaping. How could that be? But what we have to remember, that 30% of the land area in town is lawns. And so any little change in how people, manage their lawns has a big impact, and so you'll hear more about that. The other actions now begin to drop the carbon emissions below zero. So as these are phased in to the scheme over the next 20 or so years, we wind up in a situation in which the household sector will have gone carbon neutral, and in fact be sequestering carbon and creating a benefit to the rest of the world, if you will. So that's how it plays out as we move forward. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jesse Lamar Vincent, who will introduce himself, and we'll go through the rest of the presentation.
Councilors, thanks for your time. Jesse Lamar Vincent, 93 Range Road. So I'm going to talk to you about the heavy-hitting item that we have as our recommendation to households, and that is to install mini-split heat pumps. So as you saw on Denny's chart, this would cut about half of the greenhouse gas emissions from households. And they do this. Mini-split heat pumps are an incredibly efficient way to heat your house and also cool it. They use electricity, so as the grid in Maine becomes greener, which it is going to do over time at the state level, your energy becomes greener. Now, Maine has one of the dirtiest energy mixes for home heating. We use a lot of heating oil, which is pretty carbon intensive, heating oil, and also propane and natural gas. So as households, if they can move to using heat pumps and using electricity, as the grid becomes greener, their home heating becomes greener. So another incredibly important piece of this is that it's much lower cost. So this isn't something we're asking people to do, to go out and buy an incredibly expensive system that's going to cost them more money. The bottom line is it's cheaper to heat with heat pumps than it is with oil. At today's prices, on an energy unit basis, so for the same amount of heating, you're going to spend $1,800 at today's electricity rates and $4,800 for heating oil. And heating oil is almost $6 a gallon, so when I installed mine 4 years ago, that was a lot closer, and my payback for my heat pump system was like 15 years. At today's prices, it's more like 8 years. So we're not asking households to spend a lot of money for something they're never going to see a payback on. This is a system that will pay itself back as long as electricity prices don't go through the roof and oil prices stay higher than electricity prices. So, yeah. And it's already something that people are doing, so I don't think we're going to have to sell people on this especially hard. So talking with Efficiency Maine, so over 70,000 households have installed heat pumps. I'm one of them. They're all over Cumberland. You'll see the little, they look like big fans outside people's houses. Last year alone, 20,000 households installed heat pumps. And speaking with people at Royal River, they're booking appointments 6 months out now because there is such high demand. So I think if we can encourage the residents of Cumberland to jump on this sort of bandwagon as if they have an aging system that needs replacement, to have them consider installing mini split heat pumps instead of putting in a new boiler or furnace. And I'll also note that heat pumps make a great supplemental form of heat. So if somebody has a fairly new boiler in their home and they don't want to just swap it out for a brand new system, you can install heat pumps for one of their other benefits, which is low-cost air conditioning. So my father-in-law, who lives out in Yarmouth, has an incredible house by the ocean. He has radiant floor heating that he loves, but doesn't have central air conditioning. So he installed a couple of heat pumps just for the air conditioning and now uses them all winter and pays less for his natural gas. So this is something that we can phase in over time. If people don't need to swap out their heating system, we can encourage them to maybe, put in a unit or two for the air conditioning benefit and to lower their heating cost in the winter. And you can kind of, it works well with all kinds of other systems, including wood. I burn wood in the winter as well as use my heat pumps. Some of the other benefits are improved air quality. All of these heat pump units have filters that you have to clean every couple of weeks because they're filtering particulate matter out of the air. Some of them you can fit carbon filters on them so they can filter the air even more. And then safety is the third major benefit. You may have read articles about how using natural gas or propane for heating in your home can be dangerous. It can explode, but also there's some amount of gas that can build up in your home, even at small levels, which aren't necessarily healthy to breathe. So there is this safety benefit of that heat pumps are just running on your electricity, so there's no danger of an exploding house from natural gas leaks or anything like that. So yeah, we think this is a no-brainer of an item, and frankly, we think this is going to happen whether we recommend it or not, because, like I've said, it makes sense because it's cheaper and you get incredibly low-cost air conditioning. As our summers get warmer, that's, I think, something people are going to install these for no matter what. So, yeah, we think it's a home run item, and we hope you guys will support our efforts to encourage our friends and neighbors in Cumberland to install these when and if they can. And I'll tee up my colleague Riva to talk about our next item. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Jesse. Good evening. I'm Riva Crute. I live at 103 Schooner Ridge, and I'm a proud member of our Sustainability Committee and the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. So let me go to the second item. So action item number 2, which is not going to drop our greenhouse gas emissions in half, but it is going to have the second highest contribution of greenhouse gas emission reduction, is to have our households switch over from ICE, internal combustion engines, over to electric vehicles or to plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Now, the beautiful thing about this is the opportunity. Because one of the original things that we did is we actually went and looked at what is the current vehicle stock in town, and you can see it there. We have about 7,500 vehicles, and most of them are light-duty passenger vehicles, so that includes your SUVs and so on. That means it's about 2.5 cars per household. 99% of them are cars that are driven on gas or diesel, and 1% is electric. And when I look at that, I think that's a terrific opportunity for us, just a huge opportunity. The upside there is great. Most of these cars, by the way, are safe, reliable, Toyotas, Hondas, Subarus, and so on. And they have, our owners are keeping their cars for about 8 years on average. So what we said to ourselves is, okay, that means that in the next X years, up to 2050, there's going to be several cycles of car purchase going on in the average Cumberland household. And the context that that's going to happen in is going to be an increasing interest in electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. The state of Maine, in its climate action plan, has assumed a 5x increase in electric vehicle sales to 220,000 by 2030. Can we get a 5x increase? That'll only take us to 5%. I think we can do better than that. The town council has committed to our town's fleet going to zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. This should really be a kind of welcome flag to town residents. If the town can do it, then can the households do it as well? And to pick up something that Denny was saying, this does not and increasingly will not involve you going out and spending more money. The total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle or plug-in hybrid electric vehicle is really rapidly coming on par with some of the other internal combustion engine cars. Our police department is a big advocate of both of the hybrids and of electric vehicles, and Chief Rumsey his plan is that as he refreshes his vehicles, he will be bringing in more of these EVs and PHEVs. And he is very clear, and he drives a Prius, by the way. He is very clear that he's doing this because they are as reliable, they're as safe on the highways, and there's a tremendous saving in air quality and in greenhouse gas emissions because on the electric vehicle side, you do not have to idle your car in order for your car to be able to kind of move quickly. And so a huge greenhouse gas saving. So we have a huge advocate already in the police department, and we have a town that's committed. So our request is that with your support, we should really broadcast these ideas to our households. One of the people who we spoke to in doing our work on this is Adam Lee, who drives a Tesla, and he's also a big advocate of electric and partial and plug-in electric vehicles. And, you know, we have people in town who are already being leaders in this. So what we're saying is that we estimate that by 2050, the average household will make 3.5 new purchases of cars. And we want households to be considering switching over now to electric and plug-in hybrid electrics. And if 80% of those purchases are EV or PHEV, the town can reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by more than 5,000 metric tons. That's about just 10% of our current baseline. A huge contribution, an easy contribution, a safe alternative, and one that over the lifetime of the car is going to cost you less. Thanks a lot. I'm going to move on to my colleague Suki.
Thank you all. I'm Suki Curtis. I live at 8 Pine Lane, and thank you all for your time. So I'm on action item 3, which is to adopt sustainable landscaping. And maybe unlike the heat pumps and the electric vehicles, this one's a little squishier. It's more than one action. It's sort of a collection of actions which altogether have a high potential of lowering the carbon dioxide emissions for the town. Denny is the numbers guy. I'm the landscape person and the native plant person, but Denny helped figure out just how much we might be able to save. And it could be 8,500 metric tons, maybe up to 10,000 for the whole town. And that comes to about 3 metric tons reduced for a median house lot in town. So the two core actions of sustainable landscaping are planting more trees on one's own property and reducing the area of turf lawn. And these obviously work together. When our committee undertook the survey of town residents back in 2020, planting more trees was one of the top scoring actions among those who responded, which is excellent because it turns out it actually makes a difference. And the time to start planting trees is now. So the sustainable landscaping's potential for reducing carbon dioxide emissions really rests on the capacity of trees to absorb carbon dioxide and then to store it in their cells. They also happen to be excellent at absorbing and filtering rain, making landscapes more resilient in the face of increasingly heavy storms. And in our objectives for the town to be both lowering the impact of climate change and becoming more resilient to the inevitable results of climate change, trees are really about the best allies that we could hope for. They also provide shade, cooler temperatures, food for beneficial pollinators and wildlife, cleaner air, and of course beauty, which I think really matters. So reducing turf lawns, the size of turf lawns, is sort of the partner with the planting more trees. And that would be, obviously this is all voluntary, beginning to shrink the amount of lawn that any one person's property has. Once again, the median house lot size in Cumberland is 1.4 acres. There are obviously people with much bigger properties. Maybe they're already heavily wooded, and those people are well on the way to already helping us meet our goals. Some of us, like me, live on lots that are less than a quarter of an acre, so my impact isn't going to be very big, but I'm doing it anyway. And so replacing some of the turf lawn with, especially good is to plant native trees, shrubs, flowering plants, even ground cover. All of that helps to absorb more carbon and filter rainwater better, and then also minimize some of the impact of having a lawn, which has to do with the care, the maintenance it takes to keep up a lawn. I know I don't really have to tell anyone that most turf grass doesn't really want to grow in Maine, at least without a fair amount of water and pampering and other assorted things which are not on the right side of our goals in terms of climate change. So even actually small ground covers absorb more carbon and store more carbon and can better absorb rainwater than turf grass, which is just not really very good at it, partly because it's mown short and the roots are short and the soil gets very compacted. So finally, how we care for our lawns really matters. It really makes a difference. Gas-powered mowers and leaf blowers are notorious polluters, especially the leaf blowers. So replacing them with electric options can really make a big difference to lowering the emissions that any one homeowner is contributing with caring for their lawn, as well as reducing air pollution, particulates in the leaf blowers, and noise pollution, which some of you might be bothered by neighbors with their leaf blowers. So in addition, reducing the use of lawn fertilizers and herbicides, pesticides, improves the health of our home habitats, and as well as the ecosystem of Broad Cove. And in fact, because all of our groundwater eventually flows to the sea, there's a direct link between the sustainable landscaping, which is Climate Action 3, and Climate Action 10, which is ensuring the integrity of water quality in Broad Cove. One of the great things about the sustainable landscaping is there are numerous ways to start. You can make small changes year by year. It's not a, one big thing all at one time, and the rewards are generous. So it's kind of a win-win. Thank you.
So that wraps up our presentation. We've kind of covered the household sector. Been fun thinking and understanding what's going on there. We look forward to being part of an increasingly vigorous and sustainable community as this all moves forward, and a town that invests in land and forest conservation as an innovative leader in responding to climate change. Take any questions that you might have.
Go ahead, Allison.
This is wonderful. Thank you so much. I know this has been a tremendous amount of work. I have the pleasure of listening to all of you once a month, most months, and it's just amazing the wealth of knowledge and the passion from this group. So thank you, first and foremost. As I kind of read this and I'm listening to you, clearly now we're talking about households and education and surveys, and so just wondering kind of the thoughts or where you're at in the process of, okay, how do we take this to our community, and kind of where and how do we plug in? Ron and I serve on our communications committee, and so where are there partnerships? Or if you're like, we haven't gotten there yet, Allison, this was just about, what do we need to do, and next step is to think about communication and engagement and surveys and things like that. Just trying to get a sense of where you guys are at in your process and thought process there.
Well, it's definitely a long march, but we've got a good start. I think we have a website, and this material is now beginning to be circulated. We get questions. We had a member of the Lands and Conservation, one of you folks come out and show me around my lawn, and is there things that I can do? So we know there's, but it's a big task ahead of us, and that's what our Sustainability Committee is going to be focusing on.
Okay.
Actually, we'll be writing a grant with the government's, state's Department of Innovation to help us just with that. One of the statewide climate action plans is education and communication. It's possible that if we are successful in getting that grant, we can hire a professional educator or trainer, for example. Many things to be done. But we do have a website, we do have a plan, we have your support, and there's a lot of chatter in the town. So, but great question, and it's going to be right on the top of our agenda going forward.
I got a couple questions. To start, this is great. I'm just blown away by the depth of the information here and the how in-depth it is. It really points to a considerable amount of work, and the whole group is to be congratulated.
Thank you very much.
One of the things that just jumped right off the page at me when I was reading through this is that the average home is using 11,000 kilowatts a year, and I thought to myself, you know, somebody needs to go around and tell people to turn the lights off. You know, I'm just curious as to whether we can, you know, have a short blueprint of, you know, the easiest way to save energy is to not use it.
Right.
You know, not buying a new car, not buying a heat pump, but just to, by conservation measures. And so I'm just curious if there's any work that's been done in that avenue.
Yeah, very much so. You know, we want to shift to electricity because that's the lower carbon form of energy. But we want to be very careful about not overusing the electricity because that puts demands on the grid, it puts demands on the household budget. There's lots of things that can be done. LED lighting, for example, is a huge impact for the individual home. People are migrating to that generally. We talk about it a lot. Efficiency Maine is very big on this. Weatherization of the home to reduce the heat load and the you know, the infiltration of the air is the biggest form of heat loss, can drop the cost of heating your house. So there's many conservation activities that can be carried forward, and that's going to be part of our sustainability effort.
So the other question, and probably this is a little bit more difficult to answer, but the drive to electrify our lives comes as an expense if electricity is derived from fossil fuels. And is there active collaboration or criticism going to the state to make sure that we are greening the grid?
Yeah, well, that's already been is now part of Maine law, which is the Renewable Portfolio Standard. So Maine is going to be bringing its renewability percentage of electricity by 2030 up to 80%. So that's cooked in the books, and that'll be solar and more hydro and so on and so forth. But for the individual homeowner, there's a lot of opportunity. And we have a bullet in here as one of our action plans is to get individual homeowners to consider solar power, because if they stick with the standard offer, they're only going to get 80% carbon-free. If they get their own unit, it's going to be 100% carbon-free, plus the costs. And I'm very up to speed on this, Bob, because my daughter is building a house, you know, Hallie's classmate, and they've gone for it and got a quote, a 12-kilowatt system for all of their energy, including their cars. Imagine that. You can generate all of your household needs with a solar array, heating, cars, everything else. And so we got the quote. It wasn't revision. And so their levelized cost of electricity is 5.5 cents a kilowatt hour. That's compared to, you know, the standard offer of 21 cents. So there's a tremendous opportunity for if they have the siting. And by the way, we have a very good ordinance on solar power, very forward-thinking ordinance. So we're all set on that sort. So we're going to really try to strongly encourage our friends and neighbors to just adopt solar where they can and where it makes sense. Not everyone has the money, but there's opportunities to borrow now that are better. But the economics are just overwhelming, which is why, you know, this is going to be happening, because compared to fossil fuels, to say nothing about, you know, the warfare, you know, the impacts of a war in Ukraine, throwing everything up in the air, you know, it just it's energy security plus cheap energy.
The cover page was the SAD and the town council. Is there a different presentation you're going to make to them?
Yeah, we were going to pass this along to them, and of course we've got this project that you've been spearheading on the solar array for the school, and they're building a new building that has lots of things that can be done. I know you're a big fan of, you know, going a little better than code, And why not, you know, if it makes sense, and I hope they'll be thinking that way, the building committee. So we'll be trying to engage in that. And they're very good about, as you've heard from some of the students, but the faculty have been quite good about bringing along the knowledge of climate action and solutions, not just to spare, but also what you can do, you know, to make things better in a positive way. So, yeah.
Ronnie?
I want to commend you for what you guys are doing. I mean, you guys all know what I do. I mean, I'm kind of a gearhead. The proof is in what's out there today. I commend, or I encourage anybody to go for a ride in an electric car. I mean, I'm a gearhead, have been my entire life. But if you went for a ride in the new Tesla, you'd be impressed. I'm impressed, and I'm not, I mean, I'm a mechanical guy. I mean, they are unbelievably, performance-wise, efficiency, but it's not only a Tesla. I mean, I added onto my home 4 years ago. I super insulated the new part. I put in 2 heat pumps. A week ago bought a hybrid hot water heater so that I don't have to heat my water with oil anymore. My tools at my shop are all battery operated now. I can go out and change the tire on a trailer truck with a battery operated impact. Before, I used to have to lug a generator out there or an air compressor out there. I mean, they have come so far in the near future, and they're gonna continue to get better. And I commend you guys for what you're doing. It really
Well,
is
I put
unbelievable.
I put my name in the list for F-150 Lightning,
Did you? Good for you.
four-wheel drive, which
Yeah.
it knocks me out. They don't have any transmission. They just have electric motors on each of the wheels.
Yeah.
So
It-
that's
it-
a whole, like,
It's
holy
unbelievable.
cow.
I mean,
But you won't have to, you know, drag your generator out, because you just drive the car and they have a 240 plug, you know,
and you never have to have an oil change, so. But I commend you for what you're
Yeah,
doing.
thank you. Well, it's
so,
been fun. You've been very supportive as a council, and Bill and his staff been great.
yeah.
No Mo May.
I'm not,
husband's really taking
I had
that
a little
one down.
discussion with my wife. Not all of my lawn is being left to grow in Maine, just a little bit.
Would you like me to give you a motion?
We'll take a motion.
Okay. Before I give the motion, I also just want to commend everyone from the Climate Action Plan. I know that this was a lot of work. It was a year and a half ago, probably, when I stood up here with Jesse and you, Denny, and others, talking about phase 1 of the plan. I think it was actually one of the first votes that we had when I became a counselor. So I'm very proud to be sitting here today and to see all the hard work kind of put into this codified form. And so wonderful job to all of you. I know it's a lot of work that goes into this, so thank you for that. I move to accept phase 2 of the Climate Action Plan as recommended by the Lands and Conservation Commission and require the commission to return to the town council for additional funding as needed.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. Actually, before I call for a vote there, is there anybody from the public who would like to comment or ask a question? Seeing none. All in favor? Thank you.
Very much.
Next item on the agenda is 22-059, to appoint Democratic and Republican and independent election clerks. For every election, there are clerks that help out in the council chambers where we have the election, and we have equal number of Republicans and Democrats and a handful of independents that serve as. Mr. Manager, would you like to add anything to that?
No, I was just checking, because that was the first I've heard of that, so typically
Well, I
it
think
has
the
been
the independents are a minority.
the unenrolled. They're referred
Unenrolled
to.
independents,
Yeah.
yes, but,
There are 4 on your list tonight.
right, right,
Mr. Chairman, when you're ready, I'll make a motion.
yes.
Sorry, I just have one question. They're not equal.
No, they're not.
So is it proportionate to our residents' enrollment?
No, it is not. It's basically, these are names submitted by the
Equal.
parties.
Okay.
Yep.
I was like, there's no, they're
And then
not.
Tammy will
Sorry.
call and try to equally balance them in the place. So there's more here than we actually use in an election.
Sorry.
No, you're right, Allison. I added them up earlier and they weren't even. So, Mr. Chair,
Well, I glanced.
Sorry, so I'm equal to
All right,
think
all
and
right, so you guys
not-
want to get accurate here.
Now you're right.
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Democratic Republican election clerks per the list provided by the town clerk.
Second.
And I know a lot of those people, as I'm sure most of you guys also do
Yep.
too. So, moved and second, any discussion on that? All in favor? Motion carries, thank you. Item 22-060, to consider and act on the formation of a housing task force to be appointed by the town council to develop strategies and recommendations around the current housing crisis facing refugees, asylum seekers, and affordable housing issues in the town. So, this is an item that I promised to bring back, and what is basically a request is for us to create a ad hoc committee to see what the issue is, what the opportunities are. This is not an item to spend taxpayer money. This is an item to look at what we can do. Frankly, I'd like to see some collaboration with the communities around us. The town manager and I discussed a piece of land down on Route 1 that abuts, Falmouth and Cumberland, and whether we could build a project that might serve a number of different needs. So the idea behind this is to have an ad hoc committee with interested members of the public, interested members of the council. There'd be a defined working period that they would come back and make some recommendations to the council. At the end of the day, we may find that the challenges are too great for us to achieve, but I think that there's an opportunity for us to do something. So I would encourage some conversation. I have a letter that from Shirley Story, when I spoke with her earlier in the week, that I'll read to you. Bob, I'd like to weigh in on one more matter, but recognize that I'm not here to help with the decision-making. I'll go with the will of the council since this is a difficult topic. I would support the creation of a committee of interested parties to see if our community can assist with housing, immigration, refugees. I recognize that we have to be responsible with our seniors and mindful of the decisions we make that impact them directly. But I also have a belief that in our great country of immigrants, we have a moral and humanitarian obligation to help if we can. I'm not necessarily in favor of assistance that would impact our budget, but if town leadership could facilitate a committee seeking solutions to this moral and ethical challenge, I would be entirely supportive. Like you, Bob, I believe there may be ways we can help, but that we just have not thought of it yet. For example, there are many discussions about the land south of Route 1 developments. Maybe there's some joint ventures that would allow for temporary housing of immigrant families. Similarly, I will encourage cautions because it seems like there is a great deal of development happening in some larger communities like Westbrook and Brunswick that might be better suited for the needs of immigrants. I've thought about this and perhaps a great deal more than others because I will soon have an immigrant nephew from Senegal. And I recognize how difficult assimilating into our communities can be. Gaining citizenship, documentation, and permission to work is much more difficult than it needs to be. I believe that there are many people who would like to see more immigrant assistance, but I also believe to a certain extent that if these people are sincere, they will step up. In conclusion, I grew up learning the phrase, the great melting pot. We were taught it in school, and it is a phrase that we as a country seem to have lost sight of in our consciousness. There are many points of view on this subject and much debate to be had. For me, it is an ethical dilemma, and I used to teach that ethical dilemma is not the difference between right and wrong, but the difference between right and more right. That's from Shirley. So I think she encapsulated well what I think our vision could be and can be. So So I will take questions and comments.
Go ahead, no, go ahead, Mark.
I was just going to jump in and say, I think it's a very worthy cause and one that I would be pleased to be a part of if I was asked. I don't view this as just an asylee or a refugee issue. I view it as an affordable housing issue. And for some folks, affordable housing might be this standard. For other folks, it might be the bare bone standard of this, they need a roof over their head. And so I don't view this as we are talking about constructing a place just for asylee seekers or refugees. I'm viewing this as much larger, affordable housing, resolving that issue in our town, which may include the assistance for some of those folks. So, like I said, I think it's a really worthy cause. Obviously, it's a hot topic for not only our town, but every other town in Maine. And I applaud the council for considering it, so.
Bob, I mean, you can't, we all get what the issue is, but we also have to look at the Portland caused majority of this problem. Ethan Strimling and a bunch of lunatics in Portland kept encouraging and encouraging and encouraging the influx of refugees to Portland. That was prior to all the apartments being developed into condos and duplexes being developed into single homes, and Portland has gone through a transformation, excuse me. But Portland caused the majority of this problem, and now they want us to bail them out after they have gone and said, no more. We can't handle anymore, we don't want anymore, but they've left, or tried to leave us holding the bag. You know, Mark, we've tried affordable housing in this community, several projects. And the key is here, it's affordable the first time. Every single affordable project in Cumberland failed the concept. Everyone. It was affordable the first time, and then people started flipping the houses. And it's not affordable the second time, it's not affordable the third time. And these affordable houses now are going for $400,000, $500,000, $600,000. We've done our part. We have done our part. I really enjoyed the presentation that was made here a couple weeks ago. I got a lot of information from it, and I think our role is more of getting the word out as far as assistance, what people can do as individuals, but I don't believe that I don't think Cumberland is structured to provide the type of support that you're seeking. And I don't think it's a realistic goal for us, especially given the limited amount of town land that we have left that we can convert to public housing. We don't have a lot. When we're looking right now at a little acres here, a couple acres here, it doesn't go to what's really needed. Cumberland's too far away from all the social services. I just don't think it's a realistic plan that you're looking at.
I'll weigh in on this. I just want to put out an example. On Route 100 in West Cumberland, there is a 24 by 30 ranch that is 60-plus years old on 1 acre of land, and the asking price is $499,000. So where does affordable start in the town of Cumberland? To me, that should be an affordable home, but it's $500,000. To me, that should be something that a first-time home buyer could walk in with a couple of kids to buy for $200,000 or less and put their kids into the school system. But it doesn't happen in this town. That house has been sold 4 times in the last 3 years, and every time it goes up $100,000 with very little improvement. It's because of the market. If we go forward to this, I'm afraid you're not going to get an affirmative vote tonight. It's not going to benefit the taxpayers of the town of Cumberland at all. It's not going to benefit our seniors. You can't even find an affordable rent in the town of Cumberland. An affordable rent in the town of Cumberland is $2,500 a month for rent. I feel that we owe it to our seniors and to our residents before we can step forward with this. And I don't care if you table it tonight, because I don't think it's gonna fly.
So so I guess my question is more coming from what Counselor Segrist had thrown out, which is looking for some clarity of what you're really looking for this task force to do. Because I envision that it is a bigger housing conversation. We've talked about in pieces, housing for our seniors, affordable housing for folks that regardless of age are looking to stay in their home and taxes are going up and they can't afford them. And so I do see this as a bigger housing conversation. So I don't know if perhaps we do table it and put a little more clarity around what you're asking for. But I also know time is of the essence for potentially one piece of what you're looking for this task force to do. So I don't know if maybe you can provide a little more clarity of like, because kind of how you talk about it versus the memo that's in our packet. The memo's a little more broad, but I know you have a specific kind of immediate conversation you want this task force to focus on. And so I don't know if maybe we're getting a little lost in that too, of understanding what you want the focus of this task force to be.
I think there's a group of volunteers out there that are ready to tackle this charge. And I think that we deserve to give them the opportunity to take it up. It's no skin off our nose for them to go out and fail. That's to put it bluntly. But the, counterpoint to some of the things that we've said here this evening. It's appalling when you think of what affordable housing is and the cost of it. I have an email from a couple of the folks that just left here, and affordable housing under the definition is $500,000, and that's based on the income of and some state and federal guidelines, but it's about $112,000, $115,000, and that equates to $500,000 affordable housing. So yes, there is the challenge is not easy. And part of that challenge is to change how we think about what is housing and what is the housing stock and how we build housing stock. We can't build single-family homes and make it affordable housing. What we might have to be doing is to re-examine the whole concept. It may be a high-rise. We could all, and at least three of us can say we grew up in this community, and we can say that this community doesn't look like the community that we grew up in. And each one of us has a different view of what that looked like. And if we got Howe and Story in here and talked about what it looked like 80 years ago, it'd be a far different story. But it still is the community that we grew up in. And the point of my exercise here, or the point of where I'm trying to take this, is that we have a group of people that are willing to take this task, if you will, come back with some recommendations to what housing might look like. And part of that inclusion, as Mark said, is affordable housing. I believe that the senior housing piece, that's me, I want to keep that as a council task, because I think that we've done enough legwork on there that I want to keep that under our charge and purview. But part of what we are looking for, the opportunity for housing, is not necessarily immigrants or asylum seekers, but workforce housing. And so they're all, it's all interconnected at some level. You don't have to read too much depth into the papers, and you don't have to drive around too far to see that there's a help wanted sign on every street corner. And you know, there are transportation issues that have to be addressed, and so, you know, I'm asking the council to allow a committee to be formed, give them a task, and let them report back to us. So, on some level, I hear you table this and come back, but on another level, this is, I feel strongly enough about it that I want to see where we can go with it. And it may be a dead end. We may not have the solution that, you know, some of us dream that we can be, but without showing initiative, we won't get any place. And so,
So then can I ask the question again? Because I think it's fair for, if this were to pass, what this task force is going to do. What are you asking them to solve?
I'm not asking them.
Specifically the temporary housing need, or is it a more general housing crisis and affordable housing in general?
I think it's threefold. We're looking for affordability, workforce housing, immigration, asylum-seeking housing. And I believe that when we drill down, that we're really not talking about a lot of different housing stock. I think that the opportunity to combine a structure that says, all right, this many houses, this many units may be market-driven, this many units may be, you know, Section 8 or people that are asylum seekers. And if we sit down and talk with some developers, we may find that there's some solutions that are different than a single-family house on a 10 by, you know, 400 square foot lot or whatever, you know, quarter acre lot. But I think it's,
What's the expectation for how quickly they come back?
6 months.
And Mr. Chairman, would they also be addressing, I would envision some of the other concerns, transportation to social services, things of that nature as well, that kind of are ancillary to having affordable housing in a town like Cumberland?
I think that has to be part of the discussion. You can't put a housing development up you know, up on the integrated or extension, expect anybody to get any place.
Yep.
You know, I think the conversation would have to be with the buses, and I think, you know.
And you know, our participation on the bus line is gonna cost us money. That's not free. I mean, all this stuff adds expenses to the tax. We turned down public busing because it wasn't practical in this town, Bob. At the time, and that had to be 7, 8 years ago, our cost for them to make one stop at the park and ride was gonna be $30,000. And that was several years ago. So if you're telling me where our participation would be $75,000, $80,000, $90,000, right now, that's probably realistic, just to have the bus stop in one place. So all this,
If we put it on Route 1, it wouldn't be a problem.
well, that's where they
That's where
proposed it.
the bus goes down. Route
Yeah,
1.
that's where they proposed it before, was on Route 1, and at that time, it was gonna cost us that money, and it wasn't practical for our residents. How are they gonna get to Route 1? So,
Sorry, if I could just add one comment here. I do think, I understand these are legitimate concerns, but I have to say, and I mean this with respect, I think people vote for elected officials to help them solve issues. And whether we can do it or not, I don't know at this point. But I don't feel personally comfortable saying, well, the market dictates what this is. The thing that regulates the market are the folks that pass ordinances and laws to help dictate what those market terms are, just the same way a referees a football game to try to make sure it's fair for everyone playing, right? There may still be winners and losers at the end of the day, but at least the rules are fair and it's set up in a way that everyone can compete. And so I think by setting up a task force, if all we're doing is getting a group of people and giving them 6 months to come back with proposed recommendations to resolve some of these issues, we can vote on those issues at that time. I don't think we need to vote on whether we're moving forward with affordable housing yet. This is just to form the task force. So, for what that's worth.
Is there anybody from the members of the public who would like to address us on this issue? Yes, sir.
Rick Doan, 4 Catalpa Lane, and appreciate the opportunity to offer my thoughts. Fundamentally, I think that this process is not taking into account some important factors that it should be taking into account. We have a comprehensive plan, and I've been involved in a number of issues in the community over the years. Some of you have heard me ad nauseum talking about them, which always come up as one-offs and contract zones and things that have to be done now for various reasons. You just took a survey. I would strongly encourage you to not act on this issue until you start to develop through your comprehensive planning process what are really the values and issues that the people of the community want and need. The asylum crisis, which was the impetus from everything I've seen in the council deliberations and in reading the memo, is a terrible thing. There's absolutely no chance that anything you do right now is going to impact the 1,700 families that Portland has brought here and now can't help. Your best case scenario is you're going to have to find land, you're going to have to permit it, et cetera, et cetera. You're years down the road before the first family moves in on anything. You have time to find out what the values of the community are and have a thoughtful process. I also think that the fact that Portland failed, and they were arrogant, they were not thoughtful, they were going to do it right, and all of us Hicks were going to follow along. They failed. There are no solutions at the state level currently, but there are bills in the legislature that are talking about these very same issues, and I hope that they can provide some guidance to us if we wait for them, and admittedly, that's the next section. There are long-term issues in this community that involve seniors. You've all tried to make a difference there. Affordability for people who have actual direct connections to the community. They should be front and center. I'm sorry, the asylum seekers, the people from various places that are not good places to be, you should have our compassion, and as private citizens, we should do what we can. But at the end of the day, I think we should solve the issues that we already have. We should look at our taxes, we should look at our growth. We should do a lot of things that are really front and center to this community that are not yet solved. So I encourage you to step back from this. I would also encourage you to define it more completely, because as Portland saw, you can rent a motel. When you put asylum seekers and homeless people in mixes and various combinations, it tends to create unintended consequences. So thank you for the opportunity to address you, and I just encourage thoughtful deliberation on this.
Thank you, sir. There is, yes, just before you get up there, we are not going to step back from our responsibilities for the taxpayers, the long-term people, long-term residents here, and our elderly, and that is front and center, and has been this whole past year. Our discussions have centered around that, and that won't change.
Terry Maloney Kelly, again, thank you. I appreciate the fact that we're having a public conversation about this issue. I was quite disappointed 3 or 4 years ago when there was not a discussion publicly amongst our leadership and citizens regarding the needs of those that are coming from away. our town has changed. We are not anywhere close to what, regardless of when I grew up, but quite frankly, in the past 10 years. Our town has become one in which we cannot accommodate the needs of others that may not have income levels of middle or upper income. So as far as, I feel we have a duty as a community because of who we have become and who we cannot help or accommodate, to perhaps help the other communities that can. So if we can't have affordable housing or, which is really, I mean, how many more times are we going to talk about affordable housing in Cumberland? It's ridiculous. That's not even a term that should be used. So perhaps, and we know that we can't. I mean, you folks, that's why, you know, it seems to me you don't, I understand why you may not want to spend time on the issue, but I still feel as a community that we need to have a public discussion about this. I know that our community is very generous. So you can't just assume that perhaps the citizens would not be willing, if we're unable to house physically, to be supporting the communities that are. So I really appreciate you taking public discussion and having a public discussion about this issue. And I really would urge you to actively participate in at least confirming what our solutions may or may not be, as well as consider the alternative of perhaps supporting financially those communities that can. Thank you.
Anybody else? So I recognize the challenge before me, and I'm willing to step back from the breach, so to speak, and give us some more time to maybe come up with a little bit better wording of how this will look, what specifics that committee's charge may be. That being said, I'm not going to let this drop. I'm going to take it upon myself as a challenge to come back with a stronger presentation. So, and I've heard, and I hear what everybody said, and I think, you know, the hill is steep. It's not an easy task, but if we don't try, if we don't at least try to address these, I think that's the bigger failure. So
I think that's going to be a good move on your part, Bob. I really do. There's nothing that I would love more than to see an affordable development, whether it's in Cumberland or in North Yarmouth or anywhere for our residents. But it is a huge task. I mean, because of the land value here. And don't get me wrong, I think this is one of the biggest top priority things in town is an affordable house lot somewhere so that my grandkids might continue to grow up in this town. I mean, you know, the reason I'm here is because my parents left me a piece of land. The reason my kids are here is because I left them a piece of land. But that's going by the wayside. We're running out of land. And the problem that I have, my house was affordable when I built it. Now it's not affordable anymore, and we all have that same problem. There's not one of us that's sitting here now that's house isn't worth twice what we paid for it. In very few years, 30 years went by like that. And my house is worth 3 times what I paid for it or what I built it for. And it's a sad situation, it really is. I'm worried about my grandkids. Where are they gonna be in another 30 years? And it's a serious thing, so I hope you table it, so. And I know you can't make a motion, so.
Bob, we really are a victim of our own success, I think, in many, many ways. You know, I think my parents built on Pinewood Drive for $19,000, and the house sold a few years ago for $375,000, and the next door house, which is the ranch also, just sold for in the high 400s. I mean, we've worked and worked hard for a great community, a great school system, place where people want to live, and right now we're paying the price for it.
Mr. Chairman, I'll give you a motion to table.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made. Table, homework to come. All in favor? All right. Okay. Item 22-061. To consider and act on moving the June 13th Town Council meeting to June 6th and the June 27th Town Council meeting to June 20th to swear in newly elected town councilors. Mr. Manager, is there any commentary, or is this just what it is?
The election on June 14th will make the council chambers basically unusable for that evening's town council meeting, and the charter requires that you meet immediately on the Monday following the the June election, which will also be a federal holiday, just to let you know. It'll be the observance of Juneteenth, so.
Pretty self-explanatory.
So moved?
So moved.
Second?
Second. Motion's been made and seconded to switch the dates of our next, well, the two meetings in June. All in favor? Passed unanimous. Thank you. All right, that concludes the official business of the evening. New business, I think there's a fair amount of things that are here to discuss. I know I've got a couple. Mark?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, from new business tonight, I just first want to thank Councilman Tom Gruber for all of his years of service. I think it was a surprise to me and others that he was stepping down for personal reasons, and I just want to thank him not only for his service to the town over the last 11 years, but also for encouraging me to get involved. He was one of the first people that when I wanted to get involved in town government here and volunteering, he said, you should try to volunteer for the Lands and Conservation Commission. And so he encouraged me and put me in contact with folks there, and then I was able to sit on the Climate Action Plan team and be a part of that process when they were putting together Phase 1, a very small part of that process, I should say. But he also was one of the first people that really encouraged me to potentially run for office. And I remember very clearly him being one of the first folks that I raised the idea with, and he didn't make it sound like it was completely crazy. So I guess thank you, or not thank you, for getting me into this, Tom. But you will be missed here on the council, and just want to thank you for all of your service. So that's it.
I will echo a lot of what Councilor Segrist said. I still sometimes get to see Councilor Gruber at the pool on Friday mornings, so I will still get to see him. But I, had the pleasure of sitting right next to him my first year, and there were many times where, he could give me a little side eye of what am I supposed to do and how am I supposed to do it. So I will miss seeing him on the 2 Mondays, and as chair of our finance committee for sure. So brought a lot of experience and grace and leadership to this council over the years, and just his service for this town in general. So thank you. One thing I wanted to hit on was actually something that Mrs. Maloney Kelly brought up earlier, was that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We did form a kind of ad hoc subcommittee around mental health across our 3 communities, including the school district about a little over a year ago. And one of the events we did was planting a tulip garden in all 3 of our communities, and that was done in the fall. And those tulips are blooming. And as to kind of close out, we'll say kind of our formal programming, if you will, but it will continue. We'll still make sure we're having the conversation and really smashing the stigma, but we will be installing permanent signage for all of those tulip gardens to remind folks that may be new or weren't part of the planting what those stand for, and really to remind us that hope is always there. You are not alone, and that, you know, we are a community together. So that signage will be going in hopefully by the end of the month in all 3 of the Hope Gardens, and be there for many years to come. So we will continue the work around smashing the stigma, but that's kind of, we wanted to kind of close the loop on the plantings that happened last fall. In our town, it was done during the bicentennial, which was a great opportunity for the community to be together. That's all I had.
Well, I'd be remiss in also not chiming in on Tom's departure from the council and how really sorely he'd be missed. He's just a good, decent man, and, you know, I think Tom has always set the bar on civility. We've disagreed on, as all the councilors have, on different votes, but Tom was always a gentleman about it. He was the first to greet you when you came through the door here in the council, and the last to say goodbye. I respect Tom's decision to step down, but he really, truly be missed. He's a really good man. And the only other thing I have is, like Terry mentioned earlier, the departure of Tom Burgess. Terry said we've known Tom since he was a kid. Ronnie and I, Shirley, all grew up with him. Tom is the epitome of a community policing before the words community policing came out. And, you know, once in a while, Tom would get recognized for it. But it wasn't Tom saying, look what I did. It would just come to the public and on what Tom has done for various people. And Tommy's a friend of mine. I've known him since he started police work. I got into policing, chased Tommy around while he's still in school. And then Tommy got out and chased the next generation. And he always kept the community first. And he knew the families, he knew on what action to take. Tommy always did the right thing. And you know, it's ironic that the start of National Police Week, Tommy's getting done, but I think it's, you know, the reason that we have the recognition this week is because of community cops like Tom. So, be missed, Tom, and enjoy your retirement.
It seems like this is gonna be the Tom and Tom week, but, Tom Uber Gruber, that's how I'll always remember him. I mean, if anybody needed a ride, Tom was there to give him a ride. I mean, Tom was just the kindest-hearted guy that I ever met. And he'll be missed, but I know we're all gonna see him around here because he will not leave the food pantry, I'm sure of that. That's his livelihood. He's done a phenomenal job there, and he's done great things for the community, and will continue to do so. And he will be missed here on the council. Tom Burgess and I were best friends growing up. We both lived in West Cumberland. Tom has seen 4 police chiefs come and go, with a lot of confrontation with a couple of them. I mean, but Tom was always there if somebody needed something or somebody needed to know something. He knew this community. He knew everybody in it. One thing that strikes my mind is 3 or 4 years ago, Bill, the elderly gentleman that needed some help at home, and Tom bent over backwards. There was a picture of Tom doing his dishes for the elderly gentleman at his sink in his police uniform. And to this day, he still communicates with that gentleman every single week. And the guy was very thankful. I mean, the guy was in a bad place, and Tom saw to it that he was taken care of.
Near starvation.
He was. It was a very, very sad situation. I mean, the guy was just not taking care of himself, and Tom took it under his wing to make sure that this guy was taken care of, and the guy has not forgot it to this day. and that's the type of guy that he is. Tomorrow, there's a luncheon thing here, and I will be here tomorrow for Tom. And he will be missed, but he'll still be around town. He has a new nickname in town, but I won't share it. And I have my $20 for the 4-H food pantry, Mr. Stiles, so thank you, very worthy cause, and I'll continue to donate. That's all I have.
Tom Gruber fits into that a group of people, and there's a lot of them here in this community who wear a lot of hats, and you know, every one of those hats that Tom put on, he performed with exemplary service, and he joins the ranks of the dedicated few in this community. And anyways, my thanks to Tom and his years of service, and wish him the best. So I have one piece of housekeeping, I guess I'll call it, or I would like to suggest a charter change. This is a small piece, and we don't have to take action on it tonight, but I do want you to think about it, and we can bring this back at a later date. I'd like to change the date of when new counselors start their service. And I'd like to move it to July 1st instead of the meeting following the election. I think there's that little bit of lag times, if you will, that between election and getting started. It allows the opportunity for someone who is stepping down for whatever reason to have their last meeting, and sometimes there's some unfinished business that they can finish, and I think it allows the new person coming on board that time to get a little bit of orientation. So something to think about. We can bring it back and talk about it. It would be something that we would have to there's a time frame if we wanted to make a charter change that we'd have to do.
Bob, the charter change, if I remember correctly, does it have to get voted on by the public?
Yes, I think even minutia, things like this have to go to.
In November.
In November.
So should it be, and I'm all in favor of having that conversation with Bob, but should we look at the charter, because several things we have never changed because it's been a daunting task. Should we look at that and see if there are anything else that?
Have more than one item.
Yeah, I mean, if we're gonna, the voting public's coming in and we're gonna have a ballot for the people on town issues. And I assume it'd be a separate ballot, Bill, on town issues?
It would, but it would have to be minor in nature, because anything substantial would have to go to a charter commission, and that could be a 2 to 3 year process.
Okay.
But I think it's a fair question if there is
If there's another minor item.
other
Yeah.
logistical or minor things of date sequentials and things like that. I mean,
Yeah, I'm just
so
thinking,
that's
Allison,
something
if
to move through.
if we got 5 minor things that need to be changed, let's get them all on one ballot and get them over and done with.
The last charter change you made was when Shabig Island left the town of Cumberland, and Harlan Story made a motion to increase your pay at the same time. So those two things came together. Both were approved, so.
All right, for the folks that are interested, there is a candidates night, and I had my dates wrong. I thought council meeting was next week, but it's not. It's this Wednesday, May the 11th for town council candidates, and May 18th for school board candidates. And both of those events will be held here at town council chambers. All right, and so the last thing that I have this evening is a discussion regarding to fill a vacancy on the town council. And some of us have never had any experience with this, and some of us have done this, and as those who have been keeping count, I think it's been done 4 times. And a number of years, but, so, the clock is running. We have 60 days to fill the seat. It would be the intention for us to seek applications from interested members of the community. They would address a letter to Brenda. She would collect the applications, the nominating committee, and it would be my recommendation that since there are only 2 members on the nominating committee, that we add Shirley Story to make that a third odd, so we have an odd number. It would be the nominating committee chairman's job to, and again, this is where we will discuss the ins and outs. But my thoughts are that the nominating chair would review the group, the committee, much like we operate with the finance committee, that they would review the pool of applicants. If we had, say, 50 applicants, we would expect that the nominating committee would whittle that down to a smaller group. And as Shirley has said to me with her past experience, that the nominating committee and the council as a whole pose questions to the prospective counselor, and a recommendation would be made, and then it would be brought forth to the whole council for a vote.
I hope we don't have 50 applicants, but.
I was gonna say, we would be so lucky.
Right, well, all right, I'm ever the.
Where were they for the ballot?
I'm ever the optimist, all
We
right.
might all be in trouble.
Mr. Chairman, do we know, we have a 60-day clock, but do we know when those letters would need to be submitted to Brenda?
I believe we were looking for a 30 days from today.
By June 10th.
By June 10th, okay.
Right, that's right in front of you, Bob, the date's right there.
And so it is. So I'll read this. Pursuant to the town charter of the town of Cumberland, the town council is requesting citizens with at least 1 year of residency to consider applying for a recently vacated town council position. All citizens who have resided in Cumberland for at least 1 year and will continue to reside in the town during their term, this term expires June 13th, 2023, and have an interest in serving the term of this important leadership role are encouraged to apply. To apply, please send a letter of interest before June 10th to Brenda Moore, Council Secretary at 290 Tuttle Road, Cumberland, Maine, or her email address. Interviews will be held the week of June 13th, and the position will be forwarded to the full town council for action on June 20th. The town charter requires all town council positions to be sworn in and seated the Monday following the June election. Oh, okay, so back to discussion, questions, thoughts.
Maybe just that last point, I thought we had until July to fill this seat because of the 60 days. Sorry, just that last sentence kind of implies that this person would be appointed by the Monday after. I didn't think we had to do it by
I
then.
think we have some flexibility there.
I don't think you get to the, well, I'm doing it on the date I was notified, so I don't think you get to the first council meeting in July because it's the second Monday. So I'm not sure, I think 60 days, the clock runs out before that second Monday.
The council could have a special town meeting.
You could.
A special council meeting at any time, given notification.
Absolutely.
That's a good point.
Okay.
Thoughts on protocol, addition of the third member.
What's your reasoning behind that, Bob? Not that I'm not opposed to it, I just want to know your reasoning behind adding a third person.
I like the idea of an odd number.
Because the assumption would be that the nominating committee
Which is currently made up of Counselor Kopp and myself.
would review
And
the
it-
applicants.
It always was 3 people in the past, so I mean,
I think it makes sense. It makes sense not only just from an odd number standpoint, but also from her experience with folks stepping down. in the
That was
past.
why I suggested
makes sense.
Shirley, rather than myself, or Allison, or,
And that sounds good, but have it back. We shut off
application
applicants in a month.
in a month, 30 days.
Okay.
Everybody comfortable with that, or
Good to go?
anything I missed?
Got it all?
motion to adjourn.
I believe that covers everything.
Second.
Motion has been made to adjourn, a second. All in favor? Thank you for attending.